welcome to You Go and Learn. This is Mrs. R, and we're here to talk about where I've been for the last couple weeks. As you can see, I'm not hiding the fact that I'm sick very well. But the story about how I got to this state is quite relevant to the discussion at hand. So we're going to start out with that, and then we're going to talk about some bad news and some good news. Back in December, I walked into a truck gas station on the I-5, and I was suddenly hit with a bunch of memories, and about being sex trafficked as a child. I had known that was a possibility in my background for a little bit. I've been suspicious of that for some time. You know, the Disney version of my life before this last month and a half involved incest so severe that I had to put my own dad away when I was 13, and he's doing a life sentence. So that was the version of things that I already had to work off of. And so you hit adulthood, kids, and you suddenly realize that a lot of things that you thought were true about your childhood weren't really comprehensible to you as a child, or you forgot them, or in my case, your mom intentionally erased them from your memories. Mostly through threats of violence, but she actually did burn, like, all of the photographs that exist of me in a pretty systemic fashion as well. So since then, that was the first in a very long, very painful series of memories that came back to me, and I'm not gonna get into too much graphic detail here, but, you know, there were at least, I think we're at 7 attempts on my life by my parents before the age of 13, all of which I now remember. The trafficking was certainly not a one-off, and it started when I was 4 or 3. And actually the stuff I remembered from the trial was much, much worse. Much, much worse than what I originally remembered during the trial. And, you know, at the time I had the strength to put them away with what I had, but I couldn't control the things I didn't remember. So, those have all kind of come back to me. And this is what really being triggered looks like. This is what it really means. I've been throwing up pretty much nonstop since December. I had regular sort of disassociations. I went in catatonic states several times. I've basically been bedridden and on inpatient psychological care. The fact that I can speak coherently to anyone, and that I haven't completely lost my mind, is a testament to you know, a form of magic I don't really understand, or I don't know what it says, but it's, you know, I'm fortunate is what I'm saying. And the other thing that's happened is many people know that I was diagnosed a couple years ago with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I've long had chronic, very serious, very severe chronic pain problems, mostly as in the form of headaches. But they extended into other areas too, and eventually ended my teaching career when my shoulder got taken out, and my ankle and my knee got taken out, and that's why I'm not in the classroom anymore. Well, as it turns out, all of those injuries are from abuse, from when I was a kid. And I have ether poisoning, I'll let you use your broad imaginations to figure out where that came from. And so that's why I've been sick for the last 29 years. Because abuse makes you really sick. That's what it does. That's what trauma does. So I have injuries all over my body that we have now been able to trace back to specific memories. And, you know, as I've been going through the process of uncovering this stuff, those injuries have been biting back with a fucking vengeance. And so, I've been in a lot of pain for the last couple months, and it's been hard to sleep, and, you know, I almost got lit on fire when I was 4, and I saved my brother's life from that. So just today, I'm still kind of seeing fires where there are none and things like that. And I just wanted people to see what this actually looks like, and what it actually means. And I wanted to be honest about what's going on, because I know that I don't do a good job of telling people, which, you know, is because my parents beat me for telling people things, so that would be why I don't do that, in case you know, hate me for it or whatever. The other reason I'm sharing this with you is because I was really hoping to have, like, a lot more time, to recover from this. And that's not gonna fucking happen. And it's not gonna happen because no one has stepped up to the plate to do anything about what's going on, and in the meantime, things have gotten worse on the left end of things. Let's start with the assholes. They call themselves Antifas. I don't care what they call themselves, or what ideology they claim to practice or believe in. As far as I'm concerned, they're traitors and assholes. And I'm going to explain to you as clearly as I can why, because nobody else has done it, and that's really frustrating. First of all, pepper spray is what white girls use to walk to their cars in neighborhoods they consider sketchy at sundown. Okay, it's not what you use to take on the greatest military on earth. It's not. Because they have tanks, you guys. I don't know if you're aware, but the military's actually really well organized, and I have my doubts about pepper spray's ability to bring down the man. I just do. You know, I started carrying a knife when I was 14. And they think pepper spray is gonna bring about the revolt. That's lame, and it's weak, and it makes us look fucking stupid. And it makes us look like cowards when we pepper spray old people and women about my size. You look like a bunch of cowards. But more importantly, besides the lameness, which I could talk about for extensive periods of times, because honestly, the anarchist cookbook is freely available on the internet, and I know 14-year-olds who know how to make Molotov cocktails, so it's real offensive to me. But we're not going to dwell on that for a moment. What really concerns me is that it's ineffective, and that the consequences for the people are very real. You guys have to understand that, unlike you, I didn't grow up hearing about how the 60s were just fun Woodstock times, okay? I grew up learning that the 50s and 60s where most of the communities that I came from got their rights, and that struggle was hard fought, that it required a lot of organization, that it required a lot of people working together, and that it required a lot of hard compromises. And I also grew up learning that all of that work was undone by a bunch of bratty ass hippies, okay? And let me tell you guys something. The rest of America hates hippies. They hate hippies, you guys. I don't know what happened to you in your upbringing that you're not aware of that, but they don't like them very much. So that's problem one. But the reason that they don't like them you have to understand is that they were spitting on people who had no choice about whether or not they could go to war. And they were attacking working class people. And they were causing disorder and discord to communities that were wrecked by that. You know, the inner cities have never been rebuilt from the 60s and the 70s. They just don't rebuild them. And anyone who lived through the 80s, who lived through the Reagan era, who lived through the Clinton era and the tough on crime era in the hood, knows how disastrous 30 years of Republican dominance will be for the working classes. They know that because we've lived it. It's very easily going to happen again, and it's already started. And the hard hat revolt is coming, whether the Antifas know it or not. And all the Republicans will have to do to continue to win is point to the tactics of these few fringe assholes and then claim that we're a bunch of terrorists nobody has to listen to. Because if we continue to support them, we are. That's the reality of the situation. I mean, the fact is the Antifas have a website where they're asking for donations. And if you donate to the Antifas, you need to understand that you are giving material assistance to a possible terrorist organization. Because that's what they're going to get labeled. The only reason that they haven't done that yet is because they're benefiting hugely from these actions. You have to understand that for the Republicans, everything that the Antifas does helps them. Because it demonstrates to normal Americans who are just trying to go to work, trying to take care of their families, trying to take care of their kids, that the left doesn't have a solution for them, that the left is a threat to them, and that the left is dangerous. And all they have to do is keep bringing that up in every single subsequent election for the next 30 years and we're toast. And I think it's easy for the Antifas to ignore that. I think it's easy for them to ignore the context of that. Because they're not going to pay for the consequences. They keep saying that it's black people doing this, but I don't know if you've actually looked at the photographs. There's no person of color. And in fact, for the Antifas to continue to scapegoat people of color when they know a crackdown is coming as a result of their behavior is racist, offensive, and extremely dangerous for marginalized people and people of color, specifically. So the fact that they continue to do that is wrong, and the left has done next to nothing about it, and has encouraged them, if anything. They beat up a professor, and she wrote a note about how it was okay because, you know, they were angry or something. And look, these things are happening at Berkeley, they're happening at Middlebury. These are not majority black campuses. There aren't that many black people at Berkeley or Middlebury. Certainly not enough to explain the numbers of Antifas, okay? There's just not... It's like you guys have never been to Berkeley. I don't know how many black people you think are there, but it's not a high number, okay? This isn't happening like, you know, in Oakland. So, they... Take it up with the UCs. They should let in more black kids, but that's the reality of the situation. It's not a high percentage black on that campus. So continuing to blame the black kids, which is what they're doing, okay, is problematic at best, and, in my opinion, traitorous to those communities. And if nobody else is going to stand up and say that, then I will, because I don't give a shit. And they can all fuck right off. I want to make clear, because I guess this hasn't been made clear, why these tactics will never work in a democracy. And I'm gonna try to say this quickly. In a democracy, you have to have the consent of the governed, and that's the people who vote. And people have this weird aversion to violence. It's amazing. It's so surprising. You guys had no idea it existed before now, and ISIS doesn't plan for it. Like, that's the thing, is you have to understand that when we talk about actual violent revolts, or when we talk about, like, a group like ISIS, they're doing it because they want to recruit more desperately poor people by causing a crackdown on those communities. So in essence, either the Antifas are intentionally trying to cause a crackdown on minority communities, or they're completely delusional about what their tactics are going to result in, and what they're used for. These tactics do have a history, they have a context, and they have a purpose. And they're not the only tactics available to us. And there's a lot more effective ones. And they're never, ever, ever, ever going to work in a democracy. They're never going to work in a democracy. And the reason is because you have to have the consent of the majority of the people. And the majority of the people are never going to say it's okay for you to be violent towards your neighbors. Because the majority of the people are trying to go to work, they're trying to take care of their kids, they're trying to feed themselves. And also because they're not dicks to their neighbors, okay? You need to remember that you live in this country with these people, that they are your neighbors, they are your community, whether you like them or not. There's a lot of you I don't like, but I don't try to kill anybody, okay? So I'm getting real sick of that shit. The fact that they don't understand why violence is a problem, I think demonstrates just how fucking privileged they are. My aversion to committing violence towards others comes from the fact that I have had so much violence done to me. That's it. It's where it comes from. It makes me sick, the idea of hurting another person, because I know what that feels like. And if any of these kids had any real world experience with any real world pain, they wouldn't want to do that to other people. And they don't represent the people, and they don't represent the masses, because the people have spoken, and this is not what they want. And that brings me to the good news I want to talk about, which is that this week, the people demonstrated that they do have power, that they do have agency, that they do have control, and they reminded Congress of who their actual bosses are. And I want to say this directly to people. This is not to the left. This is directly to people. You are their boss. I don't care if they have an R or a D next to their name or what ideology they claim to believe in. They serve you. You are in charge. This is a democracy. We have to do what you want, not what they want. And it's time for us to remind them who the fuck is in charge. You're their boss. Trump is not your boss. You're Trump's boss. Steve Bannon is not your boss. He works for you. He serves you. Anyone that calls themselves an activist, a community organizer, or a leader of the people is a servant of the people. Or they aren't doing their job. And this is America, where if you don't do your job, you still fucking get fired. I want to remind you who has the firing power. And I want to remind you that this is still a democracy, that this is still fucking America, and that these people, that we are still the good people in this country who want to take care of their communities and their families. And nobody can take that from us if we don't give it to them. So give them nothing and demand everything.